the decision I made about that was well after I had started this book, and when that horrible case occurred, I was as devastated as everybody else. And one of the things that went through my mind, since that part of Connecticut is not that far from where Scarpetta's headquarters is, I said, you know, in real life, she probably would have responded and helped her colleagues out in this. And that led me to the next question of what would it do to her? We haven't seen her really quite that devastated by the cases that she works, although they have a strong effect on her. She's now squared up against a very different monster in modern times, not just in terms of what happened in Newtown, but if you look at what in this book is called spectacle killings, where you have what almost are like Walking Dead people who commit these horrific crimes, and people, you know, the other human beings are nothing to them. They have no regard for themselves, and ultimately, as we're seeing in real life, they're almost like suicide bombers. They want to go out in a blaze of evil glory, right up to being acknowledged by the White House. These are the types of cases we're seeing. And this is not something Scarpetta was ever up against in the early days of her career, but it is the types of cases that she would be working. So what we see in the beginning of Dust is not that case itself, because I never take you there. We see the aftermath and her own emotions when she comes home and immediately comes down with the flu, and she's trying to recover both from the memories and from getting sick when the phone rings and she's off to work something at 3 o'clock in the morning. And this begins a series of other crimes with not the same type of killer, but yet again a modern monster, somebody who is creating spectacles at the expense of his victims. So I try to keep Scarpetta in the world that the rest of us inhabit. And it's painful decisions sometimes, because I could look the other way, but I don't think that's right to do. I know the types of things that she would be seeing. I know the very powerful opinions that she would have about it, as would her colleagues, both FBI and local police. And it gives me an opportunity to share the point of view that really comes quite honestly from me having so much association with the real people who do the work. Well, I think it is a really complex social issue, and there's not one easy answer of what to do about it. I know everybody thinks it will be fixed by gun control, but I promise you, I truly believe there isn't any one thing that's going to fix this. You have people who seem to be empty vessels. They feel that they have no reason to be here, and they probably get the idea from other similar crimes that they're going to do something that's going to make them really famous. And it's worth it to them to lose their own life in the process. And this is not the only, Sandy Hook is not the only case we've seen like this. We're seeing it all too often these days. And I think that we're going to have to study this and say, what are the components that are creating this, and what can we do as a society to protect ourselves? Because we should be able to go to the movies or a shopping mall or in an airport or to school and not worry about mass murder. And this is a new problem, a relatively new problem in America, and the more it happens, the more it will happen. I do think that some of the ways that we handle it are not helpful. I think when you show video recordings of these people going through doing the shootings from, you know, what's on the security cameras, I think when the White House acknowledges these events, it's one thing to deal with the victims and the families later, but when it's, you know, the first thing that we're hearing is some statement from the White House, it's giving way too much glory and power to these very disturbed people, and there are always going to be others in the, you know, afterwards who are going to get the idea. And so we're going to have to really take a hard look at this, because I'm afraid it's not going to go away. Well, when Scarpetta is called to the first crime scene in Dust, after she's just gotten home from Connecticut, and goes out to the MIT, where a body has been found, one of the first things that she does when she's examining the body without moving it or really touching it is that she shines an ultraviolet light, because sometimes that will cause residues and fibers and other types of trace evidence to fluoresce, and therefore you can see these things when you might not see it with the naked eye. And that's really important, because it might be something she wants to collect right there at the scene to make sure it's not lost by the time the body's transported to her facility. So dust comes from the fact that when she shines this light on this body of a woman wrapped in a strange white cloth out in the middle of a playing field, there's just electric fluorescence of these very brilliant colors, red, green, and blue. And it's everywhere. And she's wondering, what is this? And of course, she collects some of it there. She collects more of it later. It turns out this same residue, which she has analyzed in the labs, is related to some other cases that have happened in the Washington, D.C. area. And so part of what she has to unravel here is, what is this residue? What might it be from? And what is it telling us? And that's just one of many things that many trails that she has to go down in trying to figure out who is committing these horrible crimes. Well, one of the interesting things in dust, and I've had this before, but I explore it in more detail, is that Scarpetta is using forensic imaging, because there are new techniques that are just beginning to be implemented in forensic medicine where we're using the same type of imaging on the dead that we use on the living. A good example are CT scans. And Scarpetta has a scanner in her medical examiner's office, and she has reasons to be suspicious that this first victim may have actually died prematurely, that whatever this bad person was doing to her, he didn't finish because she died. And so that leads her down a path of trying to see if this person may have had an underlying medical condition, particularly with her heart. And so she does another procedure that implements forensic imaging. It's called postmortem angiography, where you actually inject a dye into blood vessels to see if there is a disease process going on, or even an injury that might explain something that happened to the victim. And sometimes these things aren't really seen once you take a blade to the body. So she's doing this three-dimensional imaging on the entire body, inside and out, before she ever takes a blade to it. And it tells her a very interesting story and begins to explain what may have happened to this person, and she begins to reconstruct. So I did a lot of research on that with particularly the Maryland Medical Examiner's Office, where they actually are doing these scans and have one of these scanners. So it's been a whole new thing for me to learn about. Well, I have a new character. I have a lot of interesting characters who walk through my mind, but I can't write books about all of them because Scarpetta takes up pretty much of all of my time. But I thought, you know what, wouldn't it be fun to create some really great characters for television? So the first one I've been working on is a young woman who's an investigator, a police investigator with very special talents and a very unusual past, and her name is Greta Stone. And we're right now working on the pilot for ABC with the high hopes it will spin off into a dramatic series, but I think it's a character that, a very interesting woman that everybody's going to really like a lot and find fascinating to watch.